Emily Tran sat quietly at her desk, eyes fixed on the screen, but her mind was elsewhere. 3 years of loyalty, overtime, and unpaid weekends had dulled the spark she once carried into this office. When she first joined the company, fresh out of grad school with a dual degree in statistics and computer science, she was filled with optimism. She believed that if she worked hard and exceeded expectations, her efforts would be recognized. At first, her optimism wasn't misplaced. She solved a data integration problem in her first month that the previous analyst had been stuck on for weeks. Her supervisor had given her a smile and a lukewarm good work, but she didn't mind. Emily believed praise wasn't everything, progress mattered more. In year one, she increased the accuracy of the sales forecast model by 18%. In year two, she helped migrate their legacy reporting system to an interactive buy dashboard, saving the team nearly 40 hours of labor per month. By year three, she was leading projects, mentoring new hires, and acting as the bridge between engineering and marketing. Everyone in the department came to Emily for help, everyone except the one person who could authorize her raise. Miranda Gray, the director of analytics, was a polished woman in her mid-40s with sharp cheekbones and sharper politics. She praised Emily in public meetings but shut down every compensation conversation behind closed doors. Each year, Emily would walk into the review meeting hopeful. Each year, she'd walk out with the same excuse: "You're so valuable, but budgets are tight, maybe next quarter." That next quarter never came. Instead, the gap between her contributions and her paycheck only widened. Her peers at other firms were making 25% more with half her workload. Emily knew this because she began tracking industry salaries on a spreadsheet she kept hidden in a private folder. Still, she stayed. Part loyalty, part fear, and part exhaustion kept her rooted. Her mother's health had taken a bad turn 2 years ago, and Emily sent money home every month for medications not covered by insurance. She couldn't afford to rock the boat. Until something inside her quietly snapped. One night, after staying in the office until 1:30 a.m. to fix a last-minute client error caused by another team, she sat in the parking lot and cried. Not out of sadness, but frustration. She realized no one would fight for her. So she started fighting for herself. Emily updated her resume, revised her portfolio, and reactivated her LinkedIn. Discreetly, during lunch breaks or after hours, she began applying to other roles. She wasn't desperate, she was strategic. She targeted companies whose values aligned with her own. Places that celebrated impact, not just tenure. She scheduled 2 interviews for the upcoming week and felt a glimmer of hope return. For the first time in a long while, she imagined a future that didn't involve Miranda's hollow praise or empty promises. Then came Thursday. A quarterly team meeting filled with spreadsheets, slide decks, and caffeine. Emily had arrived early to set up the department dashboard. She had her web browser open with multiple tabs, one of which was her updated LinkedIn profile. She didn't realize Miranda had walked up behind her. Emily startled, quickly minimizing the window. "It's just," she began, but Miranda's expression had already frozen into judgment. The rest of the meeting went on in awkward silence. Emily tried to focus on the charts, but she could feel Miranda's eyes on her the whole time. That afternoon, Emily received a calendar invite, HR termination meeting. Her heart sank. In the room sat Miranda and a grim-faced HR rep. No discussion, no context, just a printed form and a pen. Due to a breach of internal loyalty expectations, the letter began. Her mind went numb as the rest of the words blurred into corporate jargon. She was told to clear out her desk within 15 minutes. Security would escort her. Her fingers trembled as she packed up her things. Photos, notebooks, a USB drive, and the small cactus plant she'd kept by the window. Her coworkers peeked from behind cubicles, confusion etched on their faces. No one dared ask what happened. By the time she stepped into the elevator, tears stung her eyes. Not from shame, but from betrayal. She had given them everything. In return, they gave her a cardboard box and a closed door. Outside, the California sun shone brighter than it should have. Emily walked to her car, box in hand, heart in freefall. But somewhere between the parking structure and the freeway ramp, a strange calm settled over her. Something had ended, but something else was beginning. No longer chained by false promises or glass ceilings. She was free. And freedom, she realized, was the first ingredient to something far more powerful than a paycheck. It was the start of building something her own. Her palms were still trembling on the steering wheel, but her mind was already racing with ideas. If they could fire her for daring to dream bigger, she would give them a reason to remember her name. And not as a disgruntled former employee, but as the woman who turned their rejection into revolution. The morning after her termination, Emily woke up before sunrise, heart still aching but strangely clear. She no longer had a boss, no deadlines, no passive-aggressive emails waiting for her attention. For the first time in 3 years, she made her coffee slowly. No rush, no meetings to race to, no facade to maintain. She sat by the kitchen window of her small apartment, watching a pale beam of light creep across the floor. It reminded her that endings, no matter how cruel, always made room for beginnings. Her laptop blinked on. The same machine she used to run projections for Fortune 500 clients now held the blank canvas of her future. She opened a document titled Freedom Project. It had started months ago as a rough idea scribbled into the Notes app on her phone during one especially bitter lunch break. She decalled it that half-jokingly then. Now it felt like prophecy. Emily had noticed a common thread in her 3 years managing data. Small businesses struggled to make sense of analytics. They had raw numbers but no insight, software but no guidance. Even when they used expensive third-party tools, they rarely knew how to interpret the trends. She remembered one client who said, "I have all the charts in the world but no idea what to do with them." Emily wanted to change that. She didn't want to build another bloated platform for massive corporations. She wanted to create something that spoke directly to the underdogs. Affordable, intuitive, clean. She would call it ClearSight Analytics. The name came to her as easily as breath. She spent the rest of the day mapping out the platform. Not just the UI, but the soul of it, the mission, the audience, the voice. She wanted it to feel like a conversation, not a lecture. She wanted users to feel empowered, not intimidated. She sketched dashboards that translated trends into action steps. Wrote example notifications like, "You're spending more on ads this month, but conversions are flat. Consider testing new keywords." The goal wasn't just insight, it was guidance. She knew from experience that business owners didn't need more data. They needed context. They needed someone to connect the dots. Emily might not have a team yet, but she had clarity. The next 2 weeks became a blur of caffeine, code, and quiet determination. She used open-source libraries to build the backend. Her old laptop wheezed under the weight of her ambition. Sometimes the screen froze, forcing her to restart in frustration. But she kept going. She watched tutorial after tutorial, joined startup forums, and reached out to strangers on LinkedIn who'd walked the same path. Some responded. A few offered advice. One developer from Toronto even reviewed her wireframes late at night, sending notes with emojis and encouragement. It made the digital world feel a little warmer. Her savings began to thin. Each grocery trip was carefully budgeted. She cut subscriptions, walked instead of driving, and made her own meals. Still, she never considered quitting. This wasn't just a job search anymore. It was a reclamation. Every line of code felt like stitching together the confidence Miranda tried to rip from her. Every UI test was a reminder that she still had value. One Thursday evening, her mother called. Her voice sounded tired but proud. "I heard what happened," she said gently. Emily braced herself for worry or pity. But instead, her mother said, "You always gave too much to people who didn't see your worth. Now give it to yourself." Emily cried silently after that call. Not from pain this time, but from recognition. She stayed up until 3 a.m. rewriting the user onboarding flow. She wanted it to feel like a welcome, not a wall. 2 days later, she built a landing page and shared it on a startup subreddit. Building something for small businesses who feel overwhelmed by data, feedback welcome. She closed the laptop and went for a walk. For the first time in days, she let herself breathe. When she returned, her post had over 300 upvotes. 20 people had signed up for early access. One comment read, "Finally someone who gets it." Another said, "This looks like it was made by someone who's actually done the work. I'm in." Her heart raced, not from anxiety, but from possibility. She opened her email and saw a message with the subject, "Angel investor curious, can we chat?" It was from someone named Jonah Myers, founder of a startup accelerator in Oakland. He said he liked her vision and wanted to know more. Emily reread the message 5 times before replying. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she hit send anyway. Hi Jonah, thank you for reaching out. I'd love to chat. How's your availability this week? That weekend, she bought a secondhand blazer for $12 at Goodwill. It was a little too big in the shoulders, but it made her feel ready. The call lasted 43 minutes. Jonah asked smart questions but mostly listened. He didn't speak like Miranda. He didn't condescend or interrupt. When the call ended, he said, I can offer $200,000 for a 7% stake. You'll still be majority owner, you interested? Emily didn't scream or cry. She sat back in her chair, hands still. Then she smiled. Because this wasn't luck. This was earned. This was built. As she emailed back her acceptance, she remembered the look Miranda gave her that day, cold, dismissive, final. But this wasn't the end Miranda thought it was. The deposit cleared on a quiet Monday morning, and Emily stared at the screen as the numbers settled into her account. $200,000, more than she had ever seen at once, more than she had ever imagined would be placed in her hands by someone who believed in her. For a few seconds, she didn't move. It felt surreal, like waking up in someone else's life. But this life was hers now. Not a simulation, not a someday, this was real. She stood, walked to the window, and let the sunlight wash over her. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The first thing she did was order a faster laptop. Then she rented a shared co-working space 2 blocks from her apartment. It was nothing fancy. Just a room with good Wi-Fi, endless coffee, and a bulletin board where strangers posted their dreams. She posted hers too, looking for a junior developer passionate about building tools that empower small businesses. Underneath, she wrote equity available, heart required. Within 2 days, she had a dozen emails. Most were generic, but one stood out. Devin Yu, a 22-year-old recent bootcamp grad, had attached a detailed critique of her UI mockups with suggestions and improvements. He wrote, I don't have a fancy resume, but I believe in what you're building. I think I can help. They met over coffee. Devin was nervous but brimming with quiet energy. Emily handed him a test project with a week's deadline. He turned it in the next day flawless. She hired him that afternoon. Now Clearsight had 2 voices, 2 minds, 2 beating hearts. Together, they refined the prototypes. Devin handled the codebase while Emily focused on strategy, outreach, and testing. She reached out to 3 small businesses she had consulted with in the past. I'm building something new, she said. Would you try it for free? Just give us feedback. All 3 agreed. They didn't forget how Emily had once stayed up late to solve a problem their paid consultants couldn't. Feedback poured in. Loved the simplicity, could use better mobile layout. This report changed how I scheduled my staff. Every comment became fuel. Emily adjusted dashboards, added a help center, rewrote error messages to sound more human. By month 3, they had 10 trial users. By month 4, they had 40. Jonah called once a week, not to pressure, but to support. You're doing something rare, he said. Don't let the noise get in your head. She remembered Miranda's voice often. Not in longing, but as a warning. Miranda once told her, you're too soft to lead, you think like an idealist. Emily smiled when she remembered that. Because every client who signed up proved her wrong. Softness wasn't a weakness, it was the soul of what made Clearsight different. Their competitors offered tools. Emily offered trust. It was slow, yes. But it was steady. Each new business that signed up was a story. The bakery down the block that used her trend reports to reduce waste by 30%. The dog groomer who scheduled her appointments better based on data Emily helped surface. The single mom who ran an Etsy store and cried when she saw her first real profit map. It was never about big numbers. It was about deep ones. Emily began keeping a journal titled Client Wins. Every time someone shared a breakthrough, she wrote it down. She knew one day she'd look back and remember that this was the real currency of her work. That autumn, they received a message from a nonprofit bookstore in Seattle. We heard about you from another vendor. We're drowning in reports and still blind. Can you help? Emily responded personally. She and Devin worked all weekend to onboard their messy legacy systems. It was chaotic and clunky. But by Monday morning, the bookstore director had tears in her voice. This is the first time our numbers make sense. We were losing money and didn't know where, now we do. That moment changed something in Emily. She realized Clearsight wasn't just a product. It was her redemption. And it was also becoming a lifeline for people who had been ignored by the tech world. She used some of the funding to hire a UX designer part-time. Her name was Priya, a single mom with stunning talent and a laugh that filled the office. Suddenly, the team was 3. Then 4, as a marketing intern joined from a local college. Clearsight began to feel less like a project and more like a home. Emily brought in lunch once a week. Not to win loyalty, but because she remembered the years she ate cold leftovers in silence. She wanted her people to feel seen. By the end of year 1, they had 120 paying users. Some only paid $9 a month, others $29 depending on needs. But Emily wasn't measuring success in dollars. She measured it in freedom. The freedom to wake up and work with purpose. The freedom to say no to toxic clients. The freedom to build something that didn't hurt people to make money. Then one unexpected email came in. From a recruiter representing Miranda's company. Our analytics division is undergoing transformation. We'd love to explore collaboration with Clearsight. Emily stared at it for a long time. She thought about replying with fire. Thought about sending a screenshot of her termination letter just to remind them. But she didn't. Instead, she forwarded it to her team with one line, proof we're doing it right. And then she deleted the email. She didn't need validation anymore. She was building something better than revenge. She was building a legacy. Not a throne, but a table where everyone had a seat. And this was just the beginning. She closed her laptop for the night, stepped outside, and let the cool breeze carry away every trace of who she used to be. The second year of Clearsight began with a cold morning and a full calendar. Emily walked into their new office, a modest but sunlit space above a local print shop with coffee in hand and purpose in her step. The walls were freshly painted in soft blue, calming but professional. Posters with handwritten client testimonials adorned the hallway, reminding the team why they did what they did. Devin now had his own corner set up, decorated with action figures and post-it reminders in different neon colors. Priya brought her daughter in sometimes during school breaks, and the little girl colored quietly while her mom designed smoother user flows. They weren't just building software anymore. They were building a rhythm. Emily spent her mornings reviewing analytics, answering customer support tickets personally, and tweaking documentation. Her afternoons were devoted to product development and team check-ins. Each day was full but never chaotic. Every task had meaning. Their user base grew by word of mouth. Small business forums buzzed with posts titled, "This tool actually made sense of my mess." Local business associations invited Emily to speak. She wasn't flashy on stage, but she was real, and people trusted that more than buzzwords. Then one day, something unusual happened. An email landed in their shared support inbox with the subject, "Urgent interest from a major retailer." Emily opened it and felt her breath catch. It was from the regional operations manager of a national franchise. He explained that one of their franchisees had been using Clearsight independently and reported massive improvements in efficiency. Now the parent company was interested in a pilot. The name of the franchise wasn't just big, it was monumental. It was the kind of brand that got you on the maps. Emily forwarded the email to Jonah with the subject line, "This can't be real." He called her 5 minutes later, laughing. "Not only is it real, Em," he said, "but it's the beginning of your next chapter, call them now." So she did. The call lasted nearly 2 hours. They asked detailed questions, requested a custom integration, and wanted to meet the team in person. Emily set the date and then sat in silence for a long while after the Zoom ended. Everything was changing again. But this time it was on her terms. They spent the next 3 weeks working around the clock. Devin rewrote entire sections of the codebase to ensure stability. Priya revamped the interface to match the franchise's brand guidelines. Emily led user testing, handled contracts, and even wrote up the onboarding documents herself. The meeting day arrived with rain pouring outside and tension thick in the air. Emily wore her best navy blazer and a simple pearl necklace her mother had mailed her last Christmas. The executives arrived on time, three suited men and one sharply dressed woman who rarely spoke but took meticulous notes. Emily greeted them at the door and introduced each member of her team by name, not title. They ran the demo. Questions came fast, but Emily answered without blinking. At one point, one of the executives leaned forward and said, "Where did you come from? This product feels like it was made by someone who understands pain." Emily smiled, her voice calm. "Because I do." The room went quiet. And then the executive smiled too. They signed a 6-month pilot that day. It was the biggest deal Clearsight had ever seen. After they left, Emily didn't cheer. She walked into the hallway, sat on the floor beneath the testimonial wall, and simply closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to prove her worth. She had built something that spoke for itself. The next few months were a blur of scaling. They hired 2 new developers, one customer success lead, and an operations manager named Jorge who had a gift for fixing things before they broke. They moved into a bigger space across town with better light and a small rooftop where the team had Friday lunches. Emily instituted one rule: no one stays past 6 p.m. She knew what burnout looked like. She refused to let it live here. As the company grew, so did her confidence. But with growth came attention. A tech journalist wrote a piece titled "The Platform That's Quietly Saving Small Business." It featured Emily's photo, half smiling with code on the screen behind her. Her inbox flooded. Investors, recruiters, reporters, even former classmates. And somewhere in that flood, another name appeared. Miranda Gray. The subject line was simple: "Let's catch up." Emily stared at it for a long time. Miranda had left the company months after firing Emily. Rumor had it she clashed with the new board and was now freelancing as a consultant. The email body was polite. It praised Clearsight, said she'd been watching from afar and would love to reconnect. Emily didn't respond. Not out of malice, but because some bridges are better left unburned and simply never crossed again. Instead, she closed the email and opened her calendar. She had a mentoring session with a local incubator that afternoon. 12 women founders, all building their first product. All trying to find their voice. She walked into that classroom like she once walked into Miranda's office, nervous, hopeful, uncertain. But this time, she was the one holding the door open. And she intended to keep it open for everyone behind her. Clearsight was now in its 2nd year. It was profitable, respected, and growing with integrity. But more importantly, it was kind. And Emily vowed that no matter how far they climbed, they would never forget what it felt like to be underestimated. Because that was the fire that built everything. Not revenge, but resolve. And it would carry them into whatever came next. The 3rd year brought with it a quiet maturity. Clearsight had settled into its identity, not a scrappy startup anymore, but a trusted partner to hundreds of small and mid-sized businesses. Emily woke up every morning with purpose but without panic. She no longer felt the need to constantly prove herself. There were still challenges, of course. Bugs, support escalations, the occasional impatient client. But gone were the days of second-guessing every step. She trusted her instincts now, and more importantly, she trusted her team. They were a lean but capable crew of 12s. Each person hired not just for skill, but for alignment with the culture Emily had so fiercely protected. Transparency, empathy. Those were the cornerstones of Clearsight. And everyone knew it. Then one Wednesday morning, during a routine team stand-up, Jorge mentioned something odd. "Our support metrics have spiked overnight. One user submitted 87 tickets under different emails." Devin looked up from his screen. "That's not a user, that's a campaign." Emily leaned forward. 2 hours later, Devin confirmed it. A competitor had hired a third-party firm to flood Clearsight's support system, hoping to trigger service outages and create bad reviews. It was a targeted attack. Emily's first instinct was rage, but it passed quickly. What replaced it was resolve. "We don't retaliate," she said in the emergency meeting. "We respond by standing taller." They hardened their systems, isolated the attack, and issued a public note thanking users for their patience while promising transparency. The next day, a tech ethics blogger picked up the story. He praised Clearsight's calm and clarity under pressure. "This is how grown-up companies handle sabotage," he wrote. The post went viral. Emily didn't smile at the attention, but she did take pride in knowing her team had stood its ground. What they'd built was solid, not just in code but in character. A week later, they were invited to speak at a national conference on tech integrity. Emily asked Devon to co-present. "I'm not a stage person," he said. "You weren't either," she reminded him. They rehearsed together. When the day came, Devon stood beside her with a trembling voice but clear conviction. Their talk received a standing ovation. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. After the conference, a woman in her 60s approached Emily. She introduced herself as Carol, a retired CFO who had started volunteering with women-owned businesses. "I want to help your company," she said. "Not because you need it, but because I believe in it." Carol came on as a part-time advisor. She helped restructure their pricing model to serve more nonprofits. Emily watched her team thrive with new wisdom and perspectives. And for the first time, she felt the rare joy of leadership, not control but uplift. Meanwhile, the company that had attempted to sabotage them was quietly sued by their own users for unethical data scraping. It made headlines. Miranda's name appeared in one of the articles. She had apparently consulted for them. Emily read it once and closed the tab. She didn't feel vindicated. She felt sad. Sad that some people never chose to grow. That weekend, Clearsight hosted a community brunch on their rooftop. Clients, friends, mentors, and even families gathered over homemade quiche and lavender lemonade. Emily looked around at the laughter, the shared stories, the sense of belonging. This wasn't just a company. It was a movement. One built not on profit, but on possibility. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Emily stayed behind to clean up. She picked up a crumpled napkin under a chair. On it, in childlike handwriting, were the words, "When I grow up, I want to work here." Her eyes welled up. It was written by Priya's daughter. Just a scribble, but to Emily, it felt like a legacy. She sat down in one of the folding chairs and watched the city lights flicker. The skyline wasn't just buildings, it was a map of every risk she'd taken, every night she hadn't quit. She thought back to that cardboard box, the one she'd carried out of Miranda's office. She could still feel the weight of it. The sting, the shame, the silence. And yet, without that moment, this one would never exist. She whispered a thank you, not to Miranda, but to herself. For not giving up. For choosing to believe in the voice that said, "There's more than this." The rooftop breeze grew stronger. She stood and took one last look around. Then she turned off the lights and walked downstairs, her steps quiet but full of promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But Emily was no longer afraid of them, because she had built something no one could take away. Not a product, but a purpose. The fourth year didn't begin with a bang. It arrived quietly, like a sunrise you didn't notice until everything was already bright. Emily sat in her office, a framed quote on the wall beside her desk, "We build what we wish we had." The words reminded her of every moment she felt unseen, overworked, and undervalued. Now she was the kind of leader she once needed. And that responsibility carried weight, but it also carried freedom. Clearsight had reached a new chapter. Their platform was no longer just useful, it was essential to hundreds of businesses across the country. From family-owned restaurants in rural towns to nonprofit clinics in underserved neighborhoods, their tool had become the quiet engine behind better decisions. They were a Silicon Valley darling, and Emily didn't want them to be. They were community-built and mission-led. That was enough. One Tuesday, Emily was invited to keynote a national summit for women in technology. It was her biggest stage yet. She spent nights writing her talk, not about scaling or exit strategies, but about worth. About reclaiming power when it's taken from you. On the day of the summit, she wore a soft gray dress and the same pearl necklace her mother had given her. She stepped onto the stage to a packed room and took a slow breath. Then she began. She spoke not with charisma, but with clarity. She told them about being fired for job hunting, about being denied raises while being handed praise. She told them about crying in a parking lot, about building a dashboard from a kitchen table, about choosing grace over revenge. And the room was silent, not because they were bored, but because they understood. When she finished, they rose to their feet. It wasn't applause, it was solidarity. Afterwards, a young woman approached her in tears. I thought I was crazy, she said, but now I think maybe I'm just early in my story. Emily hugged her. Exactly, she whispered, you're just at the beginning. That evening, back in her hotel room, she opened her laptop. ClearSight's usage numbers had hit a record high. She smiled not for the growth, but for the lives it touched. For every late-night baker who now understood their own inventory. For every immigrant-run store that could predict seasonal dips and survive them. For every single parent who used her tool to finally get ahead. Impact didn't have to be loud. It just had to be real. Weeks later, she got an email from the governor's office. They wanted to recognize ClearSight with a State Innovation Award. Emily was stunned. She didn't start this for awards. But she accepted not for ego, but for visibility. Because when you put a woman of color on a stage with power, it ripples. The ceremony was small but meaningful. Her mother flew in for it, sitting in the front row, clutching her purse tightly with pride. When Emily was handed the plaque, she looked at the inscription, for turning hardship into hope. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel it. The full weight of the journey. The detours, the doubt, the nights of silence, and the days of fire. It had all led here. And it wasn't the end. That night, her team surprised her with a dinner. They decorated the office with fairy lights and handwritten notes of gratitude. Each one read something different. But the message was the same: you changed our lives. She stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by laughter and light, and thought, this is what success looks like. Not press releases, not headlines, but people. People growing, healing, rising together. Months later, Emily was asked to guest lecture at her old university. She walked through the campus with memories buzzing like static. She stood in front of students who reminded her of herself. Hungry, uncertain, ready. She told them her story without glamour. Only truth. When a student asked what she would do differently, she smiled. I would stop apologizing sooner. On the flight home, Emily watched the clouds shift. She wasn't chasing anything anymore. She was grounded. And yet she'd never flown higher. ClearSight was expanding slowly internationally now. Devin led the development arm, Priya was now head of product, and Jorge ran operations like a quiet symphony. Emily remained CEO. But more than that, she was now a storyteller. She spoke on panels. She mentored young founders. And she never stopped writing. Her journals from the early days were being compiled into a book. Working title: Fired for Job Hunting. Tagline: she didn't just get even, she got free. When asked if the title was too confrontational, Emily laughed. It's not a confrontation, it's a confession. Because sometimes the thing that breaks you is the very thing that frees you. Sometimes being let go is how you finally hold on to yourself. On the anniversary of her firing, she took the morning off. She walked alone to the park near her first apartment, where she used to sit with her laptop and dream. She found the same bench. It had weathered a little. So had she. But it still held firm. She sat down, breathed in the wind, and whispered a thank you. To the bench, to the past, to the girl who once thought it was over. It had only just begun.